Morning, everybody. This is already the fourth day of the Fish Species Conference 2021. My name is Katja Philippart, and together with Ruben van Teek, who's sitting next to me, we will be hosting the session. The session will take 2.5 hours. We have 3 speakers and 3 interviews live from the field for you. As I was saying, this is already the fourth and the last day. So in total, you have, for people who joined us for all 4 days, you have seen 24 beautiful examples of work that's going on fish passages. And today is all about Oceania. This is a session where we have speakers from New Zealand, Thailand, Bhutan, South Korea, and Europe. We have some announcement for the participants, so already introduced with speakers. But for the participants, you can join actively, but by using the chat. So this is for the for talking to each other. But if you have questions on the presentations or anything else, please use the Q&A button. So really do not put your questions in the chat, but put them in the Q&A button. And then Ruben will check and he will guide us through the questions and answers. There will be a poll later, and there will be also a, we also have a social media. Oh yeah, first I'll show you the map where we are. We are not in Oceania. We'll zoom in. And as you can see, here we are not on the dam itself, but very just south of this picture. And when I look outside the window, this is the view that we have here from the window. And in a moment we go to the interview, someone standing actually there, very close to these sluices. Again, the chat, the question and answers, and as a last point, the social media. Hashtag Fish Passage 2021. So welcome again, and a special warm welcome to Koen Workel. Koen, can I see you already? Hi, Koen. Yeah, yes. So Koen is actually only 500 meters away from this studio, but he is outside. So Koen, you are from Rijkswaterstaat and in charge of the big sluices behind you, are you not?
Yes, good morning, Katja. Thank you for being here. Yes, I'm at the moment, I'm at the Hardenvliet sluices. They're on the back of me, backside. And it's a big dam. It's one of the delta works in the Netherlands. And it protects us against flooding. And at the moment, it's also discharging a lot of river water. And
yeah, because it just opened, huh? Or this morning?
Well, it opened this night, but it's now only discharging river water. When it's high tide, we're opening it also. So seawater can actually enter the river and fish can actually swim along.
Because you were standing now, the water behind you, that is the sea part, isn't it?
That's right. I'm now standing at the sea part. So it's actually it's dividing the sea and the rivers, the Rhine and the Meuse, international rivers. And so this is the place where the river enters the sea. And unfortunately, the sluices they are pretty good at blocking the sea, of course, but they're also pretty good at blocking fish, unfortunately. And that's what we're trying to fix here. We are opening the sluices when it's high tide. And then seawater is flowing into the river, and fish that are really waiting there to get in can actually pass these sluices and migrate all the way up to Germany or all the way to Switzerland. So it's very important to open these front doors, the front doors of these rivers for fish.
And you also already did some monitoring, how many fish are swimming in at the moment, for example, or what do you think?
Yeah, last year we monitored with nets into the sluices, and we caught up 23 species that were passing these sluices. And in only 7 openings, we caught over 2.6 million fish. And if you then imagine that we are opening the sluices approximately 2 times per day, it must be tens and even hundreds of millions of fish that actually are passing these sluices. So it's great news for fish.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And we also see the webcam of Herman Wanningen, who is walking around and filming you. So that is and this says, could you, I can read the sign here. It says you're not allowed to fish there, which is a pity for fishermen, I guess, because it must be crawling with fish, isn't it?
Yes, well, actually there are some fisher. Well, they're not fishermen, but if you look behind me, there are loads of cormorants and sterns are now fishing at the moment. So it's a good fishing place, and birds know it already.
Yeah. And are there restrictions? So if there is, because you're letting now the seawater in, which is quite exceptional for Dutch waters, also meaning that it used to be a brackish area and then it was a freshwater area, and now it's becoming brackish again. Do you already see sign of changes in the community?
Yes, we see that especially flounder is now coming up. A lot of flounders we find now in the herring fleet. And for other species, we see some sea bass coming back. So there are also small changes. We also have to be a little bit realistic. It's a rather small opening. So it's not like a real estuarine character of the herring fleet. This is not coming back with this project. But it is really it's very good for fish migration. Fish really can pass through, so that's I think that's win, of course.
Yeah,
it's good
great.
news.
Yeah, and then the Dutch name Haringvliet. That for people who do not speak Dutch, could you explain that?
Yeah, haring is it's a Dutch word for herring, and fleet is like flow, so herring flow. There used to be loads of herring, and we also at the monitoring we caught loads of herring. So they're really waiting to get back into these waters, and it's very important of course for the ecosystem.
Yeah, that is really great. And what about the people living around the area? Do they accept now the fact that there is marine water, seawater coming in?
Well, that was not very easy, so to say. This project has a history of over 25 years.
Yeah.
Because when the dam was built, the fresh water was there was a lot of fresh water now here for agriculture, for drinking water.
Yeah.
And then letting seawater in was very threatening for some people. So we had quite some discussions, and at some moments we decided to remove the inlets for drinking water and for agriculture more eastwards. So we have now approximately a zone of 12 kilometers that could turn a bit brackish, and that's enough for us to open these sluices again. And that costs quite some money, must I say, 75 million euros. But it's all worth it, of course. Fish migration is most important for the biodiversity, for healthy waters.
Okay, thank you, Koen. I think we have to wrap it up, but really congratulations, because it's a great step, finally having this open again and let the fish swim where it would like to swim. So thank you for this, Koen. And
thank you very much,
enjoy the nice weather. Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Bye.
you. See ya.
Okay, and then we go from outside inside again to Stefan Schmutz. Stefan, are you in?
Yes, I'm here.
I cannot see you yet. Yes, I can.
Hello.
Welcome, Stefan. Hi. Hi. Although there's a river on the background, I assume it's a picture and not a real scene behind you. So could you please introduce yourself? So where are you from, Stefan? Where are you working?
Yes, my name is Stefan Schmutz. I'm from the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences Institute of Hydrobiology and Aquatic Ecosystem Management, and I'm located in Vienna, Austria, Europe.
Okay, but you also work outside Europe, so you probably,
Yes.
That's also, yeah.
What you see in the back is a river from Siberia, and I have worked in Asia for many years in different countries, but I also work in Europe and of course also in Austria.
Okay, great. So you will guide us through your recent results on this in your presentation.
Yes.
Okay, let's start then. Thank you. Good luck.
Let's start. I would try to share my screen.
Yeah. We will let you know if it works. Yeah, and you still have to put it in the presenter mode, but we can see it already.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Good luck.
Great, thank you very much. Welcome everybody. It's still early in the morning here in Austria, and I would like to wake up my colleagues here in Europe and wish also good morning in the Asian part of the world, and hello to everybody who is listening to my talk. I will talk about hydropower plus fish passage. Is this sustainable hydropower? Is it a true story or not? And I will just jump into the topic with an example from Asia. It's one of the most controversial dams that have been built in the last years. It's the Xayaburi Dam at the Mekong, Laos. And I was involved a couple of years in the environmental impact assessment study that was conducted on behalf of the Mekong River Commission. And you can see it's really a big dam, more than 32 meters high. It's a big river, more than 820 meters wide. And it's a large hydropower plant with 1.2 gigawatt power. What you also see on the right side is probably one of the largest fish bath installations worldwide. So during our assessment, which was an international panel, and maybe some of the panel members are also now here in this conference, we criticized the principal design of the dam because they just provided a standard fish bath at that time that was not able to fulfill the requirements of the different species occurring in this river. So you have to imagine that in this catchment, we have more than 1,000 different fish species. We have big rivers like the giant catfish, which has specific requirements according to the migration. We have bottomodromous species migrating upstream. We have multiple spawners and so on. So a challenging situation. But after our criticism, the company made a redesign of the fish bath. So now we have a fish bath with 2 fish locks and optional 1 fish lift, including a collection gallery and attraction flow. And also there is a downstream fish bath facility, which I will explain in a little bit more detail. And they have developed so-called fish-friendly turbines and installed it. It's already in operation, this hydropower plant. So in detail, what we can see here is several entrances for the upstream fish bath facility, more or less conventional fish baths, and then 2 fish locks that lift the fish upstream. And we have quite a high amount of attraction flow, 90 to 200 cubic meters a second. This is an amount I've never seen at any other installation. And what about the downstream system? Because that was really very insufficient in the first design, but also in the second design, it's not so clear how it really will work. They are also talking about some kind of attraction flow, but how to get the fish into the downstream facility is still an open issue. And I will show you some minutes of a promotion video that was designed for
downstream fish migration system. Also uses the water control technique that allows fish to migrate all year round. Fish can enter into the fish resting pool through a multiple openings fish collecting gallery on the north of the power plant. Special gates open and the fish can migrate downstream through a gentle slope chute, which release fish unharmed into the tail race water.
So it sounds like it works, but it's still open how it really functions. There are no details
Downstream.
Provided by the operators.
Downstream.
Sorry. And the final assessment, which was done 2 years ago, said that the project developer has not provided sufficient information on the dam's operational regime to assess the effectiveness of mitigation measures. And this is partly due to the fact that the downstream facility is not described to the full extent how it really works. And it's really an open question, as we know, to get fish down safely across such a big hydropower plant, to ensure that they are not entrained in the turbines and harmed by the turbines, as most of the audience is aware. So do we have any ideas about large fish, for example, in large rivers, how to get them safe upstream and downstream? Like here in Europe, in the Volga system or the Danube system, this is the largest freshwater fish with more than 1 ton and more than 7 meters. So is it possible even to get those large individuals across dams? Yesterday, we have seen by Mark Rediker a presentation about the Iron Gate, and I will focus a little bit on this study. The Iron Gate is located 800 kilometers upstream of the Black Sea, and we have 2 big dams established in the 70s of the last century. It's really big, 60 meters high, 35 meters high. So in this project, the WeBus project, my colleagues and I also could contribute a little bit to this study, made a literature search and collected all information on sturgeon fish baths, which is scarce information because not so many installations have been built, but there are some mainly in Russia and some also in the US based on findings they got about salmon fish layers, which have been also used by sturgeon. So what are the conclusions? The conclusions are that different types are used for passage of sturgeons. And in some cases, the fish passes work quite well. So we have up to more than 20,000 recorded passages, upstream passages of sturgeons, which is really impressive and which I also didn't know before this study. And the fish pass efficiency is depending on the situation. So we have conventional fish passes that could work quite well. We could have fish lifts that could work quite well even for sturgeons, and even fish logs, if the height is not too high, can work. But we also see many cases where the efficiency was very low. In total, of course, we do not have so many records on this issue. But the key message is, yes, it could work also for sturgeons, not the very big ones, but 2 meters long sturgeons. It's possible to build fish passes. That's a good message. So building a fish pass at the hydropower station is this meaning already that we have a sustainable hydropower. I will go back some years when we hosted a conference in 1997 in Vienna, and we got many, many applications from heart surgeries because they were reading bypasses. So there seems to be a connection between human health and ecosystem river health. But of course, we could not accept those applications for our fish conference. I will step back 10 years and give you an indication about what was considered as sustainable hydropower 10 years ago. In the good practice of the Hydropower Sustainable Assessment Protocol of the International Hydropower Association, fish passage was mentioned as one of the few clear mitigation measures for hydropower plants in relation to ecological issues. So this was already perceived at that time, but nothing more, a little bit about environmental flow, but that at that time was considered to be sustainable. So just building a fish pass was seen to be sufficient, but what is the case if you have many fish passes like in hydropower plants like in Austria? So we have more than 5,200 hydropower plants in Austria. We are a small country. Probably it's the country with the highest density of hydropower plants. So is this still sustainable if you have so many hydropower plants and just building an upstream fish pass? No, it can't be, as we can see in the assessment of the ecological status according to the Water Framework Directive. So we have the third cycle now, and we see that the ecological status is not sufficient in more than 60% of the cases, which is partly related to the high amount of hydropower stations. But coming back to the Mekong River, also the Mekong River, it's not only about the Xayaburi. There are many hydropower plants planned. In Laos, for example, it's a full cascade. And in another study, I was able to contribute to this issue. It was a study, again, by the Mekong River Commission, mainly financed by the German GIZ aid. And what we did there, we analyzed the abiotic alterations in terms of hydrology, river morphology, sediment transport, and water quality, which was done by many colleagues in this international team. And we were responsible for the estimation of the fish bass reduction besides other issues. And what we can see here is, there is some noise, please. Okay, thank you very much. What we can see here in the cascade, yeah, we see a reduction of the fish biomass estimated to be more than 50%. And it's also affecting the downstream part, the long river stretch. And even further downstream, we see a slight reduction of the fish biomass due to the establishment of this cascade. So we also have to consider multiple dams when we do the assessment. So it's a question of the level of exploitation of a catchment. We need to protect some rivers in the catchment to say that hydropower could be something like sustainable. And I will give you, coming to the last part of my presentation, to a situation in Austria where we do have cascades. For example, in the Danube, we have here a long cascade of 10 hydropower plants with only 2 free-flowing river sections. But still, in this case, it makes sense to improve the ecological situation and, for example, to restore habitats. So what we did in one of the last LIFE projects, which was financed by the European Commission on one side, and which was financed by the hydropower company and some other donors, we restored a former channelized river. It's the River Trison, over a length of 10 kilometers. And it's one of the largest restoration projects in Europe. What you can see here is the dam Danube. Here is the dam, and here's the downstream part, and this is the next impoundment. And due to the impoundment, the river mouth, which formerly was discharging directly into the Danube, and because of the lateral dams could not enter here anymore, was diverted with a channel which is blocked several times downstream of the Danube Dam. And in this project now, a new river was created, 10 kilometers long river meandering through the floodplains, and you see lots of woods and natural floodplain forest, and discharging now further downstream into the Danube. We did the monitoring of this project. Here you see some insights. It's a really nice lowland river that was created with side arms and with inundation of floodplains. So we did the monitoring and we could observe the Danube salmon entering this river section again from the Danube. It's an endangered species and it finds new habitat in this restored river section. What we also observed is an improvement of the ecological status. Those who are familiar with the Water Framework Directive know that we have 5 classes. We want to achieve the good status or the high status, and we have to improve the situation if we have the moderate, poor, or bad status. So what we can see before the restoration, we had the moderate or poor status, and after the restoration, which was ended in 2015-16, we clearly saw an improvement of the ecological status, even touching the high status. So even in a situation where you have a hydropower cascade, where you have multiple stressors, it's possible to improve the ecological conditions, at least in some parts of the river. Finally, we have to consider dam removal as one way to reduce the level of stress or the level of exploitation, also presented in other presentations in this conference. So finally, if we come back to the example of the ecosystem health and the human health, it's clear that the surgery could improve the situation if you make a bypass in your heart. And then, of course, it's a central part of your human system. But we also know we have many other organs which have to function properly. And that's the same with the ecosystem health. It's not sufficient to build fish passes, upstream fish passes. No, we also need functioning downstream fish passes at large rivers and other rivers. We need bypass systems that replace the formerly running river and partly provide habitats, as we have seen also in the Tristan example. We have to restore the habitats of channelized rivers. We have to protect some parts of the catchment, otherwise hydropower will not be sustainable, and critical, especially at the mouths of the river, critical dams should be removed. And not only the fish passage is important, but also the sediment transport and the water quality across the whole catchment. So looking today at sustainability guidelines published from the International Hydropower Association just last year shows a completely different picture. 10 years ago, they just focused in terms of ecological issues on fish passage and environmental flow. Now we have a set of 26 topics, and some of them are now targeting a wide spectrum of ecological problems, even including flow alterations like hydropeaking, sediment transport, and many others. So concluding, I think we have made steps forward towards sustainable hydropower. We have improved our monitoring system, we have improved our guidelines and standards, but still there are some open research questions left. I have put on my last slide only a few ones related to the examples I have provided, especially for large rivers. We still are struggling with a quantitative upstream fish passage at large rivers. We have no solutions, downstream solutions for rivers large with flows larger than 100 cubic meter flow. What about multiple dams, multiple impacts, turbine passages of sensitive species? We have seen some examples in this conference on the eel. What about multiple spawners which have to pass the fish pass multiple times? What about larval drift? Yeah, the dam itself, the reservoir represents a trap for the larval fish, and the few that can pass the big reservoirs, they are also affected in the turbines. And of course, the loss of habitat. It's not only about fish passage, it's about habitat also. And it's not only about hydropower. So we have also other impacts, channelization, we have climate change, we have a alteration of the temperature, of the water quality. So these stressors have to be taken into account, and the interaction with the pressures that result from the hydropower have to be considered. And finally, when we see the biodiversity crisis, we have to define what is the minimum requirement for those species, for endangered species, for endangered fish communities. How much habitat do they need at least? What kind of environmental conditions are necessary to keep them alive? So that's all from my part. I know it was a lot, but I hope you get an insight in the work we are doing here in Vienna and worldwide, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, for this great talk. We have some questions and answers, and I take the liberty of asking the first question to you. You are addressing water quality. What did you measure? Was it nutrients? Was it toxic substances?
Yeah, you know, it's when we talk about continuity, we most of the time think only about fish passage, and sometimes we also include sediment transport, but we often neglect the fact that also water quality is changed. For example, the nutrients are trapped in the reservoirs. For example, in the Mekong system, estimates said that in the Chinese part, already 10% of the sediments of the entire catchment are trapped. And with the sediments, also the nutrients, which are then lacking in the downstream part and reducing the productivity of the system downstream, just as one example.
Okay, thank you. Then I give the floor to Ruben, who is in charge of the questions and answers. So Ruben, please share the questions with us.
Okay. Hi, Stefan. Good to see you again. I was wondering, what's the discharge of your restored river, the river next to the Danube, in relation to the Danube at that very spot? And the follow-up question was, how many dams are there, from the mouth of that river to the sea?
Okay. It's a mid-sized river in terms of Austrian standards. So the mean flow is probably between 5 and 10 cubic meters a second. So it's tiny compared to the Danube, which has 1,800 cubic meters at that side in Austria. We have a couple of weirs. We have the 2 iron gate, the most downstream section. Then we have Gabčíkovo, which is in the Hungarian-Slovak border. And then we have a number of dams in Austria. So most of them now are made passable, except the iron gates, for Potamodromys species. But for the long-distance migrants like sturgeons, they are not passable at the moment. They require different facilities.
Right. Thank you so much.
That was your question, Ruben? Do you have more questions?
Is there more? Yeah, there is indeed something else that I was interested in. and that's about the Mekong River and the studies of cascade effects. Did you look at sediment transport and sediment traps in the cascade aspect of the Mekong dams?
Yes, not I by myself, but my colleagues in this study, and they could observe, as I said, that a significant proportion of the sediments are already trapped in the Chinese part of the Mekong, but the cascade contributes to the disruption of the sediment transport. So additional sediment is trapped in this cascade, which causes downstream problems. Riverbed degradation, alteration of the bars and riparian habitats due to the lack of sediments, and again with the sediments associated a change of the water quality also downstream. And as we know, the delta is already suffering from sediment lack. So we have the increase of the sea level, and we have the lack of sediment, which results in significant erosions of the delta, and the delta is densely populated, and those impacts are affecting the housings and also the agricultural land of the people living in the delta in the Mekong.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have time for more?
Yes, we do.
Great.
Yeah.
Does the sediment issue, does it also lead to a cutoff of the tributary rivers in the Mekong, or is it like downstream of the respective dams and barriers, or is it not that severe yet?
So if I understand
erosion of the main channel
correctly, then it's about the decoupling of the tributaries to the main river due to riverbed degradation.
Yes.
As far as I know, the riverbed degradation is not that severe at the moment that we have a decoupling, but what is the more significant problem is that, which I haven't shown, is hundreds of hydropower plants in the tributaries, which most of the time have no fish pass facility and no facilities for sediment transport. So this significantly impacts, for example, the 3S river system, which is one of the largest tributaries of the lower Mekong, is completely blocked now, and it's a disaster for fish migration because it's completely disconnected now from the Mekong system.
Yeah.
Okay, there would be time for still one question.
Maybe we have a question, or I guess it's more of a statement from the audience. Maybe we can discuss this later. It's a very long one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think there is nothing left to be asked at the moment.
Yeah, okay, then if I may, I will have one other question then. Stefan, you showed this bypass project, and I saw not only then the river itself, but there was also a lot of wetland. Was that created a wetland, or was it grown by itself?
It's a very interesting question because riverbed degradation, which we just discussed at the Mekong, is a severe problem in many Western rivers, which have a long tradition in blocking the sediment transport upstream. And that is also the case in the Triton system. So we had an incised river system, and we had the floodplains too high to be inundated again. So, and the innovation in this project was that the hydropower plant was open to invest a lot of money, in total 25 million euro, including the 50% contribution of the European Commission in the LIFE program, to lower the floodplains, to take out the sediments, and partly the sediments could be sold to finance the project. So it's a very innovative approach to lower the floodplains, to recouple the river and its floodplain. And it was a huge work. There was an environmental impact assessment study for this restoration project, yeah, because it was such a big project, lasted over several years, but finally, as we can see in the results, it was very successful.
Okay, great, Stefan. Yeah, we have to stop here, but we see you back later, in the panel discussion.
Okay.
So thank you for your contribution and see you later. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and then we fly all the way to Thailand. Apinun, I already see him. Yeah, and we have a live interview. We first show you where he is. There he is, at the Maejo University. Are you actually in that building now, Apinun?
Yes.
Okay, welcome. So what is your role and your interest? You're a scientist?
Yeah, I'm working on fish, mainly freshwater fish in Southeast Asia, I think, and somewhere in the Eastern Asia together with my friends.
Okay, and what do you study exactly? What on that fish?
Yeah. Normally we are study all the fish in Thailand, both marine and freshwater, but mainly my working place in the northern part of Thailand. Then mainly focus on freshwater fish.
Okay, and also in relation to fish passages?
Yes. Because in a river or in a stream in Thailand, we have some place we have a dams or reservoir to block in the river. But in Thailand, we have very few of the fish ladder. Not so many places we have that. The big dam or the big reservoir we haven't. Especially the mainstream of Ping River Basin. The Ping River Basin is one of the fourth biggest river in the central part of Thailand.
Okay, and
Yep. And another place we have the big one, but not a big one. It's a low head dam in Phayao province. We have a fish ladder. That's one. Okay, it's a function for the fish ladder. Small fish can be jumping, but the big fish also they can't.
Okay, and is there a special challenge in Thailand? If you compare with other countries?
With the chair, that is mean again.
Yeah, so is there something different in Thailand with regard to fish passages if you compare it to other places in the world?
Yes, it's different because in Thailand, at least for one river, we have at least for maybe 400, 600 species of fish and different size, different mortality, different thing. We cannot decide all the fish there. They can be jumped. The biggest one, sometimes is maybe 1 meter long, and also a small one, very tiny one. Okay, they can jump. We never success about the fish ladder in Thailand. For example, in some place in Moon River, Park Moon River, this is connected to Mekong River. Also, we have a problem, several things about the socio-economy and also they block when the breeding season they are coming, but many fish they can't jumping up.
Okay, and what you are referring to socio-economic problems? What are those?
Yes. Some species like in the western part of Thailand, for example, in the western part of Thailand, we have a small dam, not exactly small, the medium-sized dam, but they connected with the river upper part. The fish in the lower part now they cannot pass through because a longer time, more than 30 years, they block the fish upper and lower part. They are different. This look like a landlocked, like an Iceland, something like that. In the front two parts of the river, for example, in Mekong River Basin and Hoi Kha Khang River, they are separately blocked by the reservoir.
And do you have then two different populations in the
Yes.
two areas?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. And
the
are they
composition also
different?
is changed.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
fish composition is changed, completely changed.
Okay. And to which direction?
Which direction that you mean?
Now, what I mean, you said it changed, so the two,
Yeah.
two groups, but
From-
how? Are there more bigger fish or smaller fish or different species?
The fish in the reservoir, they change the group of fish, mainly the releasing fish from some guy or fishery department of Thailand. They are released and they grow there. Like some species, they are loving to living in the stagnant water, like in the reservoir. For the running water fish, no more, because the upper part of the river, sometime in Thailand, like for example, in my province nearby, not so far. The big reservoir in the lower part and upper part, they disconnected together to long time, and a small group who are still living in the uppermost of the stream.
Yeah,
that group, yeah, very few now, because another problem in Thailand, we have planting a lot of the economic species plant for chicken, for pig, something. They cut a lot of tree and they destroy a lot of the habitat.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry, we have to wrap it up already. It's time is flying, but thank you on informing us on your situation, and hope to see you live once. Okay, bye. Thank you for your contribution.
Bye. See you.
Bye. Okay, then it's now time for our commercial break. And we're very grateful for the sponsors who enabled us to organize the webinar.
It's well known that man-made structures on rivers can impede the movement and migration of fish. So studying how fish behave around dams and other facilities is vital to understanding the impact of these structures. However, these studies are extremely challenging and complex. That's where InnovaSea comes in. Using our innovative fish tracking technology, our experts can handle every aspect of a research project to help companies meet their regulatory requirements. Get in touch with us today to learn more.
Eel is a species synonymous with our inland waterways, yet numbers have decreased drastically. Fish migration is crucial for the life cycle of eel. We have developed a monitoring device for glass eels and elfers called ELFI. ELFI has already proven itself as a successful monitoring device at more than 35 locations. Monitoring with ELFI is cost-efficient and active 24/7. This standardized monitoring enables identification of trends and changes.
Welcome back. So now we go to the next presentation by Karma. Is Karma already in?
I am.
Okay, but I cannot see you yet, but people are working on it. Ah, there you are. Welcome, welcome to the webinar. Looking forward to your contribution. You are in Bhutan?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, okay. And are you at home or are you at your office, at your institute?
I'm at my office. It's about 11 a.m. in the morning here. So yeah, at my office.
Great. And where are you based? What is the name of the organization?
I am in the northwestern region of Bhutan called Ha, and I work for the National Research and Development Center for Riverine and Lake Fisheries.
Okay, and you will present your work to us, eh?
Yes,
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah. Okay, so the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much.
We will let you know what we see. Yeah.
All right. Huh. For some reason, I can't find.
The share screen
Yeah.
should be in the at the bottom in the middle. The green.
Yes, I can, but I can't find. Oh, so maybe I share
Your presentation. You got your presentation open already?
I do.
Okay.
All right.
We have a technical staff here, so I can.
I apologize for that.
Oh no, that's. We have all been there. Yeah.
Can you see my screen now?
No, we can't. Yeah, now something is happening. Yeah, and now in the presenter mode, and then you're no to the right. No, one further to the right. To the right.
All right.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one. Then it should work. If you click on that. Oh, yeah, perfect.
All right.
Oh, it was the end, but then go back. Yeah.
Oopsies.
No.
Right,
no problem.
First 5 minutes. All right. All right. So.
Okay. Good luck.
That wasn't planned at all. All right. Again, thank you so much for having me. Again, for the opportunity to present at this webinar. Now, I am not a fish passage expert, but I am a fish biologist from Bhutan, and I bring to you all a conservation story, a story of how we studied and tracked the migration of an iconic fish species in Bhutan called the golden mahseer. But first, to put things into perspective, this is where Bhutan is located geographically. It's a small country sandwiched between India and China. Again, the entire country is pretty much up in the mountains. We are about 700,000 people in total and 39,000 square kilometer in total area. We are a constitutional monarchy, meaning the power is shared between the elected government and the king. As you can see, the entire country is pretty much mountains, with our tallest peak, or the mountains, towering just under 24,000 feet. That's about 8,000 meters above sea level. The mountainous landscape of Bhutan ends rather abruptly when it meets India in the foothills. And we are talking about going from 24,000 feet to less than 300 feet over a span of 250 kilometers. And that's quite a steep drop, which is not surprising that our rivers look like this. Again, they run fast, they are full of rapids, and the hydrology is really dynamic. These fishes are home to some of the most fascinating, the rivers are home to some of the most fascinating fishes you'd come across. It is also home to this iconic fish called the golden mahseer. It's a large river in Cypriot. It's definitely one of the largest fish in the Bhutanese river system. It's found along the Himalayan region and it's a migratory species. Sadly, due to declining population in the region, the species has been declared as endangered as per the IUCN Red List. And again, we know nothing about the biology of this enigmatic fish in the Bhutanese river system. No information on life history stages, reproduction, or even migration and population genetics for that matter. And that's why we needed to study this fish. One of the concerns regarding the conservation of not just the golden mahseer, but aquatic ecosystem in general is the booming hydropower developments, something that's happening throughout Asia, and Bhutan is no exception. In fact, for Bhutan, hydropowers are the #1 revenue generator. So while economic development is important, the big question is, how do we go about striking the balance between hydropower and river conservation? And again, to be able to do that, you need fisheries information at hand. Again, try and get information on how dams and hydropowers actually affect the aquatic ecosystem in the region. Also, particularly, we would like to know how dams can impact the migration of this iconic fish, such as the golden mahseer. So that was the motivation behind our study, and we started with some basic research question. What does mahseer movement look like throughout the year? When and where do mahseers spawn, and how far do they migrate? How do mahseers actually respond to high water levels during monsoon season? And finally, do mahseers actually migrate all the way to India where they are potentially harvested? Again, to be able to answer these research questions, we needed to track the movement of this fish. And after a lot of consultation and exploring different methods, we decided to use radio telemetry. Again, the way we do is we'd construct fixed receiver station along the riverbanks, capture fish and implant radio transmitter inside them, and then again monitor the movement again through regular data downloads from the receiver station. So the approach was quite simple, at least on paper and in theory. As we'd find out, the practical and the field aspects were very challenging. So for our study site, there are 4 major river basins in Bhutan. We decided to conduct our study in one of the eastern river drainages called the Manas River Basin. It's primarily made up of 2 major tributaries, the Mangdechu on the left and Drangmichu on the right. The initial fieldwork involved identifying suitable sites and constructing receiver stations on those particular sites. And that presented a lot of logistical challenges, as several sections of our study area did not have motorable roads. And we had to carry all this heavy equipment to construct the receiver station. And so often we had to use porters and ponies along the trails, or often we'd have to raft down the river to access that receiver station point. So again, really, really challenging. The second challenging aspect of our fieldwork is the Bhutanese landscape. And for that matter, to do any kind of field research in Bhutanese conditions can be very, very challenging. And to demonstrate what I mean, here's one of our guys who's going down, making a trail as he goes. And that's the trail if anybody's wondering. That's Julie Clausen from Fisheries Conservation Foundation, who's our research collaborator, coming back from that particular receiver station site. Again, this is just to emphasize on how difficult it can be to work in that part of the world. So half of our receiver stations are line powered, while the remaining half is solar powered. using solar panel. And monsoon season in particular can be a little difficult, particularly when there's not enough light. The receiver stations that actually work on solar panels would be down and not recording data. And that's where we would lose some of the data during some portions of our study period. The stations had to be above waterline, and as a result of which we had to rely on tree branches to fix our antenna. Luckily, one of our team members is very agile and acrobatic, and it was really, really helpful to have him in the team. He certainly made it look very easy climbing the trees and fixing those antennas. For catching the fish, after exploring several netting options, we decided to go with angling, as we thought that would be the best method to keep the fish that we catch in the best possible condition. Again, mind you that none of the Bhutanese members had ever fished before using a rod and a line. Safe to say that by the end of the project, I think all of us had become excellent mahseer fishermen. The procedure, the surgery procedure, the fish were placed in a basin and a mixture of clove oil is added as anesthesia. In our experience, we've seen that it normally takes about 2 to 4 minutes for the fish to be completely knocked off. And once it rolls over, that's when the fish is ready for surgery. A thumb-sized transmitter is then surgically implanted onto the abdominal cavity of the fish. Again, the entire goal is to keep the surgery under 6 minutes. From my experience, we've seen that most of the mahseer can handle surgery pretty well. The fact that we've never lost a single fish on a surgery table is a testimony of that. We ensure that the fish is ventilated at all times during the entirety of the surgery. Once the surgery is completed, we allow fish to fully recover before releasing it back into the river. Again, from our experience, we've seen that it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the fish to fully recover. Until then, we keep them in a fish cradle, as you can see in the picture. And then is the monitoring and the data download. Each receiver station site, we go there at least 4 times a year, see if it needs repairing or not. And at the same time, we collect the data that has been recorded from all the fish movement nearby. So downloading and monitoring is sometimes easy depending upon the region or the season. Sometimes not so much, particularly the monsoon season can be a little hairy. You cannot access through land because of landslides and erosions, as well as navigating through the waters can also be very challenging. Just to give an idea of how our receiver stations are placed along our study site, initially we started off with 11 receiver stations. Those that are marked in green stars are our receiver stations. As we learned more about the movement of this fish, we had to expand our study area and we had to add additional receiver stations upstream. So this is the final project figure. We have 17 receiver stations, 107 fish tagged, over 250 million data lines. Sorting through those individually was always a tiring process. And luckily, we heard back from most of our tagged fish. 93 out of the 107 fish, we were able to track them. We were able to hear from them. So that's a pretty good turnover, in my opinion. So coming back to our research questions, what have we learned about the mahseer migration in Bhutan? So what does the mahseer movement look like throughout the year? From our study, we've seen that the upstream migration begin as early as February, and they stay up in the upstream tributaries during the monsoon. And once the monsoon has receded during the fall, at about September to October, that's when they actually start coming down. And we've seen that most of our fish actually overwinter in one of those areas along the southern ridge of the study area. And that's where they spend most of the time during most of their winter. One of the fascinating findings of this study has been the exhibition of homing behavior by mahseer, whereby different groups of golden mahseer, they have their own individual spawning stream, and they keep going back to that same spawning stream year after year, just like the salmon. That was pretty interesting. To give you an idea of what our study area looks like I said, we have Magaju on the left, Drangchu on the right, and when they combine, they make up the Manas River Basin. And we've seen that this small section on the south in the Manas River Basin is where most of our fish overwinter and spend the entire winter there before going upstream again. So let's look at the movement of one of our fish. So this fish was caught and tagged in the Manas River Basin about March 18. It hung around in the overwintering areas until May 3rd. And on May 4th, it started migrating upstream. It went into the right tributaries, and by June 4th, it went past our furthest receiver station. I knew it went further up, but that's where our furthest receiver station was located. In the month of July, it did go back and forth in and around that area. And by August, it started its descent down the river. And by August 28, it came back into the overwintering area and about stayed there throughout the winter until February. And again in March, it did the same thing. It went back to the same tributary. Coming to the second question, when and where do mahseers spawn and how far do they migrate? Mahseers use those tributaries to spawn. From our study area, we found several golden mahseer juvenile from several of those tributaries. Now, do golden mahseers use almost all the side tributaries for spawning, or are there specific habitat needs that currently remains unknown? And that is something that we want to look at going forward with our study. As far as the distance is concerned, it completely depends on how far up the drainage those spawning tributaries are located. In our study, we've seen some of our tagged fish cover over 80 kilometers in river distance and about 800 meters in elevation. Now, having said that, not all of our tagged fish travel 80 kilometers. If you remember, I said mahseers display this homing behavior, and each group has its own natal stream, and depending on how far or close they're situated, the distance of the migration, even within the species, can vary. Coming to our third question, how do mahseers respond to high water during monsoon season? We've seen that golden mahseers move upstream for spawning before the water level rises in the summer, and they do not come down until the water level has dropped after the monsoon rain. So the water level and flow is definitely one of the important factors for the mahseer migration. And lastly, do mahseers move into India where they are potentially harvested? This is the borderline between Bhutan and India, and that's the Manas River. So we've had 5 of our tagged fish cross the border and went into India. 2 came back, and we haven't heard from the remaining 3 ever since. But the great news is that most of our fish, most of our tagged fish, stay in Bhutan, and that's a great news where they can be protected. And it's our responsibility as not just as a conservationist, but also as Bhutanese, to really conserve and protect what might be a unique and also the last wild population of golden mahseer in the region. What we still have not learned, or we still yet to learn, is how, where, and when do the golden mahseer juveniles move. We don't know what the fry and fingerling habitat requirements are. We don't know how far they travel or where they overwinter. Another important thing to remember that we need to find out is how does the dam actually affect the migration of the golden mahseer, and what would be the subsequent impact on the recruitment. as I said, mahseers display homing behavior. So we don't know how the golden mahseers would adjust if their access to such spawning grounds are cut off. And that's something that needs to be looked at. Again, we've seen that water levels and flow is an important factor for the migration of golden mahseer. And that is something that hydropower projects and developments, as they go in, needs to consider, particularly regulating the flow regime in a manner that it actually allows or is actually beneficial for the golden mahseers migrating upstream in the summer. The other important aspect is fish passage. Now, we do not know if or how fish passage would work for the golden mahseer. Again, just because of our geography and the landscape, and also our lack of understanding of how golden mahseers actually respond to fish passage facilities. From our own experience, we have 4 hydropower projects, out of which only one of them has a fish ladder, and the picture is shown above. And we do not have enough information to see if that fish ladder is really successful, let alone for the migration of golden mahseer. But these are potential avenues that we can invest, we can study, and a lot needs to be known about the species and how they would respond to such structures before investing so much on a very expensive structure like that. But what we do know for sure is that these spawning habitats are critical if we are to go in the direction of conservation of the golden mahseer. We need to ensure that there's connectivity between the spawning grounds and the overwintering areas. And that's something the hydropower projects and dams need to consider, particularly with regards to their position along the river, if there are several spawning grounds up or downstream of the river. But moving ahead in the direction of long-term conservation of golden mahseer or aquatic ecosystem, it is important that more studies need to be conducted on the ecology, population genetics, life history stages, and spawning. Again, we already have a very strong monitoring and conservation protocols in place, but we need to strengthen that. We need to support the existing monitoring regimes to protect the golden mahseer. Again, like I've already mentioned, the spawning habitats, which are those tributaries, are very, very critical. And if you really need to protect the golden mahseer, I think protecting those habitats would be one of the ways to go. So in case if you are interested, there's a documentary of our project on YouTube titled Tiger of the River. The link is provided above. You can also have a project report from the official Fisheries Conservation Foundation website. And with that, I'd like to thank our collaborators, and I've also come to the end of my story, and I'll take any question if there are any.
Thank you, Karma, for this really impressive and clear talk. Yeah, they're so interesting, and I also like how you shared with us how challenging it is to get the data, which sometimes is simple. For example, it's relatively simple in the Netherlands if I compare the situation with yours. There are some questions, and I will give the floor to Ruben. Yeah.
Thanks, Katja, and thank you again from my side too. It was a wonderful presentation. Toloi is wondering what is a characteristic stream for spawning mahseer? Like what are physical variables and chemical variables? How does a stream look like?
That is such an interesting, that's a great question, by the way. And that is one of the questions that we are moving ahead in our next study. We want to look at, okay, because like I said, it's been rather random in which we've been seeing those golden mahseer juveniles. So the next step forward would definitely be, okay, identify those sites where we've already collected golden marcia juveniles, and then maybe focus on studying those habitat better. Again, all the physical and the chemical variables of the river as well as the surrounding landscape, and try and see if you can model that, and then maybe have a GIS a software identify, extrapolate potential areas. But to answer that question, we don't quite know yet, but that is definitely the direction we want to head. We want to focus on the streams from which we've already collected those juveniles, and then study them better and see if we can actually pinpoint on what exactly those variables for spawning tributaries could be.
All right, thank you very much. There's another one coming in from Gary. He states that it looks like there's a discrete stock separation of your studied marcia, and he was wondering whether there are any genetic studies planned or maybe already conducted and completed.
Yes and no. Yes, we're interested in that. We've already started collaborating with two geneticists from the United States. In fact, they were my advisors. That's what we were looking at, to see if there are discrete and distinct genetic composition between drainage. So even within the drainages, that is making clearly there is this delineation between those different stocks that move to different tributaries. And that is the direction that we were headed. And it was kind of in the middle of the study when the COVID pandemic hit and all our labs had to be closed. I was back in the US. I was supposed to work on the population genetics of golden marcia, but couldn't happen. But I think once things open up and all the facilities are ready to go, we're definitely heading in that direction of looking at the population genetics of the golden marcia.
We're looking forward to seeing results from there. We have another question coming in. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, we do.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jasmine asks, given the threat or risk status of marcia, did you find or hypothesize a reason for the decline of golden marcia already during your studies? Is there something that you can say about that?
Not specifically in Bhutan, because the project is about into its 5 years, and you really can't assess or comment on, that's a very short period of time to see any potential change, let alone to see a decline in population. But from whatever I've heard, I've learned, I think in the marcia, in the region and not necessarily in Bhutan, one of the threats is again, habitat degradation, over harvest, illegal harvest, that's definitely one of the two reasons that have been responsible for the declining populations of golden marcia in the region.
Mm-hmm. More time?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, questions are coming in. It's great to see. People are very interested in your research. One without a name is asking whether you are considering using eDNA to maybe overcome some of the challenges in your field sites, in the accessibility of it.
I have to admit, all the questions are so relevant. It almost looks like, these are people who have already worked with and they already have it. So yes, eDNA, we are working on a proposal and potentially use eDNA as a monitoring tool, because as you can see, the landscape and the riverscape, catching the fish, being in the field and catching them can be really, really difficult. And if you can just use eDNA, use water samples, and then quantify the numbers, I think that would be great. So yes, to answer that question, we are working on a potential eDNA project for monitoring of the golden marcia.
Great. If you need field assistance, let me know.
Thank you.
There would be time for one quick question and a quick answer.
Yes. Okay. Why do your marcia stay there where they stayed after the monsoon? Why didn't they move further down to India?
I think I would like to answer that question in two parts. If you've seen our map, the way Bhutan kind of ends abruptly with India, the moment it enters India, it's complete flat, and there's just not enough, valley for the water volumes to rise up. The moment it exits Bhutan, it kind of breaks out, and the water level suddenly drops. It's out in the open, and we feel like maybe that's not enough water levels of flow for the masses to actually move back and forth, almost like a physical barrier. The second reason could be natural selection. The ones that left never came back, and so the remaining ones had to, clearly the ones that remained survived, so that would be from the evolutionary perspective, it would make sense.
Okay, thank you. That was fascinating. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Karma. Thank you again for your contribution, and we talk to you later during the panel discussion. See you then. See you in a moment. And then thank you. And now we switch to South Korea. But we first switch to Pao, who is a member of the World Fish Migration Foundation, and she will do the interview with our two colleagues from South Korea.
Hi, Katja.
Pao, you take over now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. By the way, Karma, congratulations. I loved your talk. Thank you so much. Okay, so I will just share my screen for 2 minutes, very fast, just to give you a rough idea of what we're going to talk about. And I will go and switch, to our guests. So today, my 2 minutes presentation is going to be based on a fantastic, super detailed presentation from Jenny Shin in the Removal Europe seminar in 2019 that actually you can find that full presentation with all the details in our website. And it's going to talk about the case of on national level from South Korea. Back in 2008, the current government from South Korea wanted to carry out a massive project called the Korea Grand Canals that wanted to connect the 4 major river basins of the country with canals, tunnels, locks. It was massive. So the public was totally against this project. So 6 months later, the government came up with another project called the 4 major river projects. And it was basically the construction of 16 dams in the 4 major rivers of the country, and also dredging works. And it was also huge. The people were against, the population were against this project too, but it was carried out, it was done. And according to the different surveys that were done on the country, at least 65% of the country were against this project. The results, environmental impacts of these projects were devastating, were very bad, and hundreds of organizations got together to protest and to have a solution, and actually asking to remove the dams and renaturalize the rivers. So after 10 years of fight and discussion with the government, I learned this past December that the government is going to allocate at least 10 million euros to remove to remove useless agricultural weirs. And also they made a decision to remove 2 of the 16 dams and also partly remove another one, and constantly have gates open of 2 of the dams. And so, yes.
Yeah, we only have 4 minutes left now. So, and I really would like.
I already finished. So my questions are going to be with our colleagues here. Please, could you unmute yourself, Lee, Jean, and introduce, because I think you're muted. Hello, can you hear me? Jean, Lee? I think they cannot hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. Hi. Nice to see you. Could you please say your names out loud, because I pronounce them very bad.
Yes, most Koreans can pronounce it, but for Europeans it's very difficult to pronounce. Just call me Chan in the middle name.
Okay, Chan. And Lee, nice to meet you. I would like to ask you a few questions, please, about this 4 major river project, please.
Yes.
My first question is, Do you know when the agricultural weirs removals will start, the works of the removal? Do you have any idea?
Right now, they're just considering for the agricultural weirs. And this year, they have launched a new project, River Ecosystem Project. It costs about 850, nearly 800 million euros. And it is considering more than 800 weirs for their research and evaluation. After that, this year, they're going to plan to about 25 weirs could be removed, but it's just a temporary plan after their evaluations. Okay. But it's their first time for their business for the weirs. In 2006, they have just launched their, some example to remove of the agricultural weirs, which have been useless. But after 15 years, it will be the first time for us.
Wow, amazing. And about the other big two removals from the main rivers and the partial removal, do you have also any idea when the works will start and how much it will cost?
Well, we're not sure. Well, it will be tremendous amount of money will be poured into their remover or some continuous opening of the whole case of the weirs. But it depends on the what I say, the willingness of the government, the current government, because we are also in their political some kind of a change.
Yes.
This year we're going to have their new election of their presidents. Likewise, that we started all kind of these weirs and the for-real project with a new government. So we are very concerned about the political situation this year.
Okay, so it will depend on the new government, the future decisions, right?
That's right.
So maybe because if the government change, maybe the decisions that were made in January and December, they change. Okay, and is there a way, my last question, because we don't have time, my last question, is there a website or a blog or something there where we can follow the process and the news about this project in English, please?
Sorry that in 2008 and till 2009, I have also had some blogs for the English speaking people. But right now, we don't have any English blog or any kinds of news for you guys.
Okay. So then we will keep putting news in the Removal Europe newsletters. Thanks to our communication. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much, Katya. I think it's already time, right? Correct?
Yeah, but please also ask a question to your other guests. Otherwise, he's been here. And he probably has very interesting things to say. So
yeah,
so
no, but I think
for a minute
Jean,
or so.
Jean, he doesn't speak English, right? Lee doesn't speak English, but can you maybe, would you like to translate my questions to him or?
Yes, please.
I can do it.
Yes. Okay, so my question to Lee would be, what is his is his feeling? What does he think is going to happen in the future, you know, after the government might change? Does he think that the projects, you know, will come out positive on the removals, or you would keep fighting, you know, more years?
I just have dropped some notes to Mr. Lee, and he'll answer to the yes. Right now, he thinks that the all is very ambiguous in situational, because we are not certain about the political change will happen or not. And after that, if the conservative government will change to their current government, then lots of money will be curtailed from all the restoration and the removal of the weirs. It means that the old weirs could be existed. They exist as right now. So it means that we still have some more concerns about the restoration or some other riverine ecosystems.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much to both Lee and Jean for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pau, for the interview.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, then it's time for the poll. So I look at the poll master, who is Ruben, and he will share it with you, Pau.
Okay, let's see how we do this. Let me share my screen. I think you all should be able to see my screen and also the link and the code to our poll in the chat. Just go to menti.com and enter the code 18742648. And then we would like to hear your opinion on the following questions. The first, what is your favorite measure to restore river connectivity? Go ahead. Wow, we have barrier removal coming up at the first. Fish passage is also there. We have 3 answers so far. Beavers. Yeah, nice.
Referring to the talk yesterday.
Yeah, it's great to see the beaver up here too. Wow, the beaver is actually a prominent guest. It's still very large here.
Our ecosystem engineer.
Yeah. 7 people, 8 people have participated. Please just go to menti.com and participate. We would love your opinion on this. Fish passage, fish pass, bypass channels, dam removals, barrier removal stays up there at the top. The beaver is also there. Oh, we got a new one. Oh, there's a few coming in now. That's great. Diversion improvement, floodplain reconnection. We had that yesterday too. Great. Backwater and baffle. Okay. 15 people have participated. Please go to menti.com and participate. 16 people now. And
we will stop at 20. We will stop at 20. So if you want to contribute,
your
do it
last
now.
second is...
Yeah, the last person. Who will be the last person?
And there we go.
Okay, and then we go to the next, and the results will be discussed later in the panel discussion.
Great. Okay, the next question we have for you is somewhere we ask you to rank. So you can rank what are the most frequent issues around barriers and fish migration in your region. Is it upstream fish passage? Is it downstream fish passage? Is it environmental flows or the lack of? Is it water quality, habitat availability, or maybe you don't really know? Please participate. We would like your opinion on that. All right, we don't have anyone participating yet. Okay, the first one is there. 3 people, 4, 6, 7. Oh, this is so interesting. Upstream fish passage is a big deal, apparently. Wow, downstream fish passage following. Oh, this is a head-to-head race with environmental flows, habitat availability. Ah, that's cool. Ah, yeah, interesting. Environmental flows.
And everybody knows, huh?
Yeah,
that's also
that's
very
great.
good.
That's true, yeah.
Everyone is well informed about the regional situation.
Yeah, 22 people have participated. Please join in this poll. This is super interesting. Upstream fish passage way up there. Big lead, followed by environmental flows, downstream fish passage and habitat availability. Water quality is on the 5th, on the last spot. Interesting stuff.
So more people are entering. The ranking appears to be more. Oh no, it's not stable. It's still shifting.
Yeah.
So we stop at 30. Who will make the last?
This is so sad. I would love to watch that for another hour.
Yeah. But the clock is ticking. Okay, sorry, but we have to go to the next one.
Okay, yeah. I'm buying time here. We are at 33. All right. Sorry. Super cool. Okay, and the last question for now is more of a statement. You can agree or disagree. Every country should have a national fish passage strategy. One person fully disagrees. Okay, 11 people, 14, 15, 33, a third fully agree. Wow, and 50% fully agree, 17 somewhat agree.
It is interesting that you have the
This is
two extremes being the highest. Eh? Yeah, this is really food for thought during the discussion.
3% somewhat disagree and 3 don't really know yet.
Yeah, but
we see a pattern
again, we have to stop here. But we would really appreciate it if you could supply a motivation in the chat, because we can use it later then in the panel discussion.
Great idea.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks, Katja.
Okay, thank you for your contribution, and we go to the next part of our interesting session,
which is a break.
It's not a break according to my schedule.
5 minutes.
Yeah, so I got information we have a 5-minute break. So we see you in 5 minutes. Hi, welcome back to the last part of the last session of this Fish Passage conference. And now we're over to Paul. Paul, yeah, I can see you already. Welcome, Paul.
Hello.
So, Paul, could you shortly introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yep, so I'm Paul Franklin. I work for the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research here in New Zealand. And for the last few years, I've been doing quite a lot of work on trying to improve fish passage management for our native fish here.
Okay, welcome, Paul. And you will introduce your work to us by presentation.
Yep.
So the floor is yours.
Thanks.
And we will let you know what we are seeing. Yeah, it appears to be working. Perfect.
Okay. Tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening from New Zealand, everyone. We've had some great talks over the last few days, and I'm going to take a, I guess, slightly different perspective on some of the fish passage issues and talk about policy. It's something that us scientists tend to run scared from at times, but hopefully I'm going to persuade you that it can be a good thing to do. So just to give you a bit of rundown of what I'm going to cover today. So first of all, a bit of context around why policy matters and some of the sort of ideas around working at that science policy interface. And then I'm going to run through a case study of freshwater policy reform in New Zealand and how we made some great gains.
Sorry, Paul. Paul.
Yes.
There is a sound in your background.
Okay.
Kind of a...
What sort of noise is it?
More engine-like, but it's only when you're talking.
Right.
So it might be a microphone.
I will try putting a headset on in just a sec, and that might solve it. Just a sec.
We have a beautiful movie, so we can watch that.
How does that sound?
That is perfect. Thank you for solving it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, there we go. You've seen the nice lamprey climbing video there. So I'll move on from here. So I think when we look out there, the evidence regarding the negative impacts of barriers on freshwater biodiversity is pretty indisputable at this stage. Yet despite this, and despite the fact that there's so much talk about sort of a freshwater biodiversity crisis and connectivity being one of our key ways of resolving that, river fragmentation is continuing, and we're continuing to build more barriers, which begs the question of why. So that's probably not a simple one to answer, but one of the factors that I think we perhaps bypass sometimes as scientists is the policy. In the ideal world, we have perfect policy that requires people to do their best from a fish passage perspective. But very often we've been faced with either weak policy that doesn't require people to provide for fish passage or doesn't provide adequate balance between providing for biodiversity and other sort of socioeconomic goals. And or the other aspect is that we have poor policy implementation or compliance. So even where we have reasonably good policy, it's not actually pushed and adhered to. And in those cases, that contributes to poor fish passage outcomes. And I've just got some examples around there from New Zealand. So I think policy failures are often lamented by scientists. We often complain about the fact that the policy isn't there to make the right thing happen. But at the same time, scientists are not necessarily great at engaging with that policy making process. And due to that lack of interaction and engagement between the science and policy sides of the equation, it means that whilst there is evidence there to support better policy, we're failing to influence policy with that evidence. So I think what I would like to encourage, based on my experiences here in New Zealand over the last few years, is that we need to try and do a better job of bridging that gap between the science and policy side of things. And that's actually one of the ways we can probably have a really significant impact on making a difference. And I think one of the key things here is that if we want people to utilize that science and the evidence that we're creating in our work, it requires us to present the information in a way that's user-friendly, that's persuasive and politically salient. So sort of presenting that message in a way that is palatable to policymakers and that they can use. And often that requires us to frame that information in terms of decision options. So if you do this, this will be the outcome. If you do that, that's the alternative. When you start looking into this process of how we can better influence policy and increase evidence uptake, one of the key messages that always comes back is this idea of co-design and co-production of knowledge. And really, this is part of the story that I'm going to be talking about here, and hopefully showing you that it can actually work. When it comes to working at the science policy interface, there's actually one hell of a lot of literature out there now where people have been studying why perhaps this hasn't worked very well in the past. And three of the key things that come back in terms of being important for improving that uptake of information is this idea that the information that's provided needs to, first of all, be credible. And that refers to the information being accurate and factual and evidence-based. And that's something that as scientists, we're pretty good at doing, I like to think. But perhaps something we're not always quite as good at doing is ensuring that the information that we provide is both relevant and legitimate. And by that, we mean you're providing the information that the decision makers need in the way that they need it to make their decisions and at the right time. And the legitimacy talks about how aligned the information you are providing is with respect to stakeholders' values and opinions. So what the information you need to provide needs to be available in a way that those stakeholders can use it. Essentially, it's about creating buy-in to the information. It's all well and good us scientists going out there publishing nice studies in papers, but if the people on the ground can't relate to that information or access it, then how can we expect them to buy into that process and to utilize that information? So that's a bit of the context to the background of working at that science policy interface. And what I'm going to do next is present to you some of the case study of some policy reform process that I've been involved in New Zealand over the last quite a few years now. So just to give you a bit of context, this is where New Zealand is, right down here at the bottom of the Pacific. This is where I am at the moment, which is in Hamilton in the North Island. This is what everyone seems to think all of New Zealand's rivers look like. I'm not going to destroy everyone's illusions and tell you that's not what they all look like. Now, the other thing that New Zealand is obviously famous for is being the home of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. So just for everyone's reference, this is where Hobbiton is. This is where Mount Doom is. And down here is where Gollum lives. That's right, we've actually got one of our endemic species is named after Gollum. This is the Galaxius gollumoides. I'll come back to the Lord of the Rings theme in a little while. So for a bit of historical context, New Zealand had two main pieces of legislation that actually relate to providing fish passage. So the freshwater fisheries regulations have actually been in place since 1984. And within there, there's actually a requirement that all culverts and fords must provide unimpeded passage for fish, and that any other structure type can be required to have a fish facility, as it's called in the legislation. That piece of legislation sits under the Conservation Act and is to be administered by the Department of Conservation. One of the problems we have is that the consenting and control of building of structures in rivers is dealt with by completely different regulatory authorities. So that comes under the regional councils and unitary authorities in New Zealand, who manage sort of the construction of in-stream structures under the Resource Management Act via their regional plans. But the Resource Management Act doesn't actually have any specific requirements around fish passage. Now, in theory, there should have been a crossover between that regional council process and the Department of Conservation processes, but that never quite worked for some reason. And this comes back to that issue of effective policy implementation. In theory, there was a good policy there to prevent barriers from being built, but it hasn't worked out. And based on some recent barrier inventory work that we've been doing, you can see the picture there of how bad it currently looks. So at the moment, approximately 50% of New Zealand's river network is above identified barriers. And there's about another 40% of the network that's upstream of structures that haven't yet been assessed. So you can see how the picture can get pretty bad pretty quickly. So what could we do about it? It was recognized that there was a problem. And so back in 2013, a group of us got together and organized a 2-day National Fish Passage Management Symposium. And one of our key objectives there was to get together as many of the key sort of players and stakeholders in that area as we could to start the conversation about how we do a better job. So that was getting the engineers in there, the policymakers, the asset owners, the scientists, the resource managers, and getting them all into the room. And that actually turned up some really interesting bits of information. The scientists all stood up and said, hey, we've got this great guidance on how to provide for fish passage. And all the engineers turned around and go, we didn't know about that. Or the ones that did know about it, yeah, but we can't use that to design structures. So this is where it comes back to ensuring that the information and evidence is provided in a form that's usable. So following on from that workshop where we learned quite a lot, I worked with one of my colleagues, Cheol-jae, at the Department of Conservation here in New Zealand, and we established a partnership between our two organisations to try and help improve access to the resources that were already there and people apparently weren't aware of. So the first thing we did was build a website that just kind of acted as a central hub for the information that was currently available. We also then set about a process of trying to develop better guidance and tools to make it easier for people to do the job. And one of the key steps that we took was to establish a national fish passage advisory group. And sort of looking back on it now, I think that was actually one of the most important steps that we made. And we'll see a bit about that now. So this is where I come back to my Lord of the Rings reference again, and the Fellowship of the Ring as we have here. And in a way, our advisory group is a bit like this Fellowship of the Ring, where we brought together a whole bunch of disparate people who all had an interest or would be affected by work around fish passage and brought them into the same room. So that was asset owners, so like the New Zealand Transport Agency that build most of our main roads. We had the scientists, like myself. We had policymakers in there, in both the Department of Conservation and Ministry for the Environment. We had resource managers from the regional councils who had the authority there. We had the practitioners and engineers who were responsible for designing and building and maintaining and installing a lot of the structures, and also representatives from Indigenous groups as well. Now, I'll leave everyone to decide which of those different people match up with the different figures in the group there. But to me, it was about bringing that sort of diverse group of people together and trying to sort of coalesce around this goal of making a difference and improving fish passage overall. So one of the key things that has been the fundamental basis of how this process has worked really is that we've had the advisory group, we've had our science team and the policy team, and they've kind of come together over the last few years now, and progressively we've developed really strong relationships and collaborations between people. And that's been through this sort of co-design, co-production model. Really, this starts off at this identifying the needs stage. And this sort of flowed on from that initial 2013 workshop, where there were clear needs to develop better guidance that was relevant and useful to those practitioners and engineers. And also there was a requirement for tools to monitor progress and change. And so we collaboratively worked to identify those needs, scope what those solutions would look like, and then collectively we were actually able to secure resourcing for that as well. So we sort of dipped into various pots of money to be able to bring together enough resourcing to do that. And then the science team sort of took over the main phase of the next bit, which was actually developing the solutions. But throughout that process, we maintained interaction with the advisory group. And there was a sort of continuous review and revision process to try and ensure that the information that was being provided was relevant and useful and was being provided in a way that people could use it. And so when we got to the end, those tools and the guidance received a lot of buy-in from all the stakeholders across the group. And one of the great benefits of that is that because we had cross-sector buy-in right from the start, it provided a great basis for people going out there and promoting the information and making people aware of what was available. And that's actually really helped with promoting uptake. And that sort of process is continuing now as we sort of move on to the second phase. So like I've mentioned a couple of times now, two of the key needs that emerged from this was the need for a national guidance on how to do fish passage well. And so one of the key things that we've done is create a national fish passage guidance document. And this links into Ruben's last poll question about, do you think there's a use for a national strategy? Well, I would definitely agree with that. So that was our first step. And one of the key things about that was it's quite a chunky document, but we've tried to provide information that supports both resource managers, engineers and structure designers, and policymakers in there. And part of that is about framing some of the information in slightly different ways to make it usable for people. And this is actually one of the key things that has helped with feeding it into the policy process just in further down the line. The other key thing that we did was develop a national monitoring tool. We did this in the form of an app, mobile app, the National Fish Passage Assessment Tool app. And this allows people to go out to a site, collect information about the structure, record its location, and then the risk to fish passage is calculated from the information that's collected using the app. And this was actually one of the really important steps as well, because it provided a nationally consistent way of collecting that information, but also it provided the basis for the first time to actually generate a map to show how big the problem is. We were talking about how fish passage was a problem, but we didn't have the data to show it, whereas now we do. But the other key thing is that it allows people to track progress over time, which will hopefully be good progress. So feeding on from that process, one of the key steps with trying to influence policy is you actually need to align your information with when policy windows open. And by that, I mean the sort of windows of time where policy is being developed and created and sort of turned into legislation. Now in New Zealand, there's been an ongoing development of freshwater management policy since 2011. But in 2017, there was a change of government, and that resulted in a slight shift in the emphasis within the sort of policy development direction and a greater emphasis on a broader ecosystem health framework. So the earlier phases were more focused on water quality, but this broadening to incorporate more information on sort of supporting ecological values, protecting habitat, offered a window here for fish passage to come into this legislation. And the great thing was that basically everything that they needed was already on a plate for them. The guidelines, the tool were all there, and literally they had the opportunity there just to pick it up and pretty much cut and paste it into the policy. And it was seen as an easy win because it was something that required very little thought, very little preparation. It could just be picked up and moved into it. And another key thing that I think was probably an influence here as well is that the new ministers that came in with the new government had also committed to making material improvements in the state of our fresh waters within 5 years. And I think one of the great things about fish passage work is that you can literally fix something one day and see the benefits the next. So it's an easy win. And what I found interesting was that when they put this out for the draft out for public consultation, there were 17,500 submissions and only 217 people commented on the fish passage part, which means the other 17,000 people didn't think it was worth commenting on. And of those submissions, 91% were in support. And so following from that consultation process, we ended up with a new national environmental standards that set minimum standards for new structures to provide for fish passage and require that fish passage is maintained for the lifetime of those structures, and new national policy objectives that require connectivity to be maintained or improved, and fish passage action plans to be developed for all of New Zealand. Another key thing that's happened subsequently is that the Fish Passage Advisory Group has now evolved into a kind of boundary organisation that's working closely with the Ministry for the Environment, who are responsible for this new policy in terms of providing input onto the policy implementation. So, challenges ahead. I think it's great to celebrate that success. We've got a much stronger and more robust policy framework to work from now. However, we're now into the challenges of policy implementation. There's interpretation and definitions being resolved. We need quite a lot of resourcing because there's a big job ahead of the councils to make this work, and we'll have to see how compliance works out. Another thing that, or challenge that has been presented is we need good fish passage solutions, and in particular, we need a better and broader and more robust remediation toolbox. There's a few examples there on the slides of things that are being installed, which maybe require a bit more work to establish their effectiveness. And this links into a question of how do we measure success? It's very easy to say we've installed this fix on a barrier, but does it actually work? Does it achieve the objectives for ecosystem health? And finally, maintaining interaction between the scientists, policymakers, and practitioners. Now, I think the advisory group will continue to provide that vehicle, so that's good. Now, finally, into my take-home messages. I think one of the real important things that came through this was that advisory group and the role of the advisory group. The co-production and co-design of those work streams was actually crucial for achieving that legitimacy and relevance that's important for policy uptake of evidence. And creating that common vision generated a collective purpose amongst the group. But I would also say that co-production is time-consuming, complex, and demanding. But despite that, there were some great relationships built, and here is a picture of the group showing that we do smile and we hang out with each other as well. I think my other key messages are that having the vision to look ahead and identify ahead of time what the right information needs are, ensure that that information is presented in the right way and at the right time, so it's ready for when a policy window opens, was absolutely essential. And so looking ahead and horizon scanning and anticipating when those policy windows is open is helpful. Another key thing, I think, is that close communication between the scientists and policymakers through the processes helps to reduce the chance of evidence either being misinterpreted or misapplied by non-specialists. Unfortunately, we don't have fish passage experts sat there developing all of our national policies, so we need to make sure that we can help them with translating the information. And I guess my key message is that you can actually make a difference. We've shown here that through this group, through this process, we've actually managed to influence and making policy better. So I just want to finish off by acknowledging all of the people that have been on the advisory group over the last few years. And in particular, this is Shan, who has been my partner in crime, I guess, leading this over the last few years, but also Bryn and Tanya, who have chaired the group over the last few years, and in particular have done a great job of corralling everyone and making everyone be nice to each other. So thank you. Here's some nice New Zealand fish species.
Thank you, Paul, and congratulations with this success of this amazing effort working together. We still have a bit of time for questions, and I go to Ruben.
Thanks, Katja. Yeah, thank you from my side too. This was fascinating and great to see a success story like that. It's really uplifting. You mentioned the citizen science app quickly, but you didn't really go into details. Could you elaborate on that? What's in there? What are the algorithms? What does it do?
So one of the things that came out from that 2013 workshop was this need, ideally, for a national monitoring or assessment method that can be applied and objectively identify the risk to fish passage created by a structure, because previously it was reliant on the individual being out there doing the survey and sort of scratching their head and going, yeah, I think that. So the way the app is built is it requires a core set of information to be collected about the structure type. And then we actually use a Bayesian network model behind the scenes that takes those different characteristics to then predict the likelihood of passage success. And we use that then to assess the risk class. And basically it's a publicly available app. It's primarily being used by resource managers at this point. And the new legislation actually requires every single structure in the country to be identified and assessed now. So we're expecting to see quite a lot of use of it in the next few years.
It's fascinating. Have you tested it already?
Yes, yeah, it's been used for the last couple of years. So there's been around 4,500 or 5,000 structures have been assessed using it already. So we're making good progress in filling in the picture.
Really cool. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks.
Really nice. Yeah. I think we have to close it here on behalf of time, Paul, but we will meet you within a couple of minutes back to the panel session. And
Yep,
then we
no
can
problem.
talk a bit more about this. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution.
Thanks.
Now we fly to the Auckland for the last interview. Where are we going? Almost to the situation of a house. Okay, Dipedra, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if you have an industrial designed house or are you in a laboratory?
Oh, actually, I'm inside this big laboratory. It's pretty cold out here.
Yeah.
It's quite opposite to Netherlands now, so.
Yeah. Okay, and what is the organization that you work for?
Well, actually, I'm a PhD student here at University of Auckland.
Yeah.
I'm situated at Aukland, which is almost like 125 kilometers far from Paul. So we're not that far. And yeah, it's the place where I'm staying now. It's called Fluid Mechanics Laboratory. It's in the Newmarket campus. So it's a different campus where most of the students they do their research work rather than teaching. So yeah.
Okay, and this is where you do the experiments under controlled conditions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do have my laptop here, and behind my laptop there is a flume, so I can't turn it.
You can't. No, but we are so curious.
or maybe sure? Yeah, exactly. So this is what. Yeah, this is the. You see my test setup, or this is the lab and the thing that I'm using now.
And are there fish in there at the moment?
Not inside the flume, but then we do have a fish storing area. I mean, the fish aquarium just on the side of the flume. So if you see there, the white, I don't know like whether you see or not, the white area, that's the place where we put the fish. Now it's covered, so we try to maintain a constant temperature. That's why they are like completely sealed. That's we are trying. Yeah.
And what are you studying? So what is the main topic of your PhD thesis?
Well, actually, if I'm allowed to share my screen, then I can show a little bit, a few slides, and then I can talk about what I'm doing. Okay.
Yeah.
So can you see this?
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, the thing is, the main objective of our research is trying to understand the behavior of the small-bodied fish of New Zealand, especially in the flow field, which are produced by some sort of solutions that we are already using. So, and especially in the culvert, the common solutions that are in use or that has been proposed is the baffles, the small cubes. So, so what we are trying to do is that we are trying to create a flow, a different kind of flow using a different type of baffles. So, and these baffles are also recommended in New Zealand Fish Passage Guideline that has just been mentioned by Paul. So what it is that we arrange these baffles in 3 different arrangements, and then we put that arrangement at the bottom of the flume, and then we release the fish at the downstream end of this arrangement, and then allow fish to move upstream. And then when fish travel certain section, which I have mentioned here as a test section, we record their movement with the camera, 2 cameras that are directly below this flume. So this is my setup, which I have shown just now. So I call it little studio for fish passage study. So we have a lot of lights and cameras and a white background, and then this is the outer view, and this is the inner view of the flume. So we have a baffles and we have 2 cameras directly below the flume. And the fish which we are using are mostly the small-bodied fish, and they are not even bigger than 10 centimeter. We call it inanga, this one, and then banded kokopu and the koro. So I don't have that Gollum mentioned by Paul before, but,
Oh,
but yeah,
what a pity.
yeah, they are somehow similar to that fish also. Yeah, I mean, these are the video that I captured for one of the species. So in all three different arrangement of baffle. So we are still doing it. I mean, we haven't completed all the tests with the fish, but we have completed the hydrodynamic measurement of the flow in all these three arrangements. So the preliminary observation is that the fish behavior is different in a way that they travel upstream and then the place where they rest after they get tired. So still we need to do other few more tests to find the conclusive results. So we are almost halfway through it. Yeah, that's it. That's all about my
Interesting.
work.
And you can have this 3D movement.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the fish. Yeah.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
and then you combined with the hydrodynamics.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why you're using two cameras. So with two cameras, we can get the 3D information of the fish, and since we already have the hydrodynamic information in that test section, so what we can do is that we will have a 3D information of fish. I mean 3D locational information, and then we can relate that 3D locational information with the different hydrodynamic variables in that particular location. So, and then see what governs or what dictates the fish behavior the most. So, yeah, I mean, these are kind of information that we are trying to find.
Yeah, and you already showed you have different species, but do you also have different sizes then of those species? And see if that makes a difference.
Well, actually, the thing is, the first thing is that it's because of the time and the fish, these fish to have like a very limited time frame where we can collect, because they are migratory species and we can collect at only a certain time in a year. So so what we thought is that we decided to have all the fish which are smaller than 10 centimeters. So within that size limit, we have some fish like 8 or some 6. So in between 6 to 10 centimeter, we have like 100 or 200 fish. So we are not testing based on how the behavior change with size, but our assumption is that as the fish are already small bodied, so as small the size is, so definitely means that the better will be the result for us to understand what will be the result in the worst conditions. So that's kind of thing.
Yeah, it's already time, but the last question, do you know already when you are able to defend your PhD thesis?
Well, maybe like in next 1.5 years, that would be a good time for me.
Pretty soon.
So, yeah.
Okay. Then we wish you very much success. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
And then we go to the next commercial break. And again, nothing would have been possible, of course, with all the contributions, but also by the sponsors. And please have a look at the website of the Fish Pest Conference if you want to know more. See you soon.
Princeton Hydro has designed over 100 dam removals in the northeastern United States, including the largest dam removal in New Jersey. On Earth Day, just weeks after the Columbia Dam was removed, American shad returned upstream to their native spawning grounds for the first time in over 100 years.
At Low-Tech, we've been advancing wildlife science for more than 35 years. Our receivers are trusted by researchers around the globe for any number of study applications. Our enhanced WHS 4350 acoustic receiver is JSATS compatible and provides approved detection range. Our new SRX 1200 receiver offers advanced features and trusted reliability of our previous generations. Wherever your species moves, make sure you have the right equipment for your study, for our experience to work for you.
Hi, I'm Warren from Oregon RFID. We design and manufacture half-duplex pit tag readers. We also provide technical support to help you set up and maintain your own site. During a break, we invite you to take a look at our new single and multiple antenna readers to see the many unique features. Our US website is OregonRFID.com, and our European friends can visit us at OregonRFID.eu. Enjoy the conference, and we hope to see you in person at the next one.
Welcome back at the last part of this session, being the general discussion. Let's see if all speakers are there. Please make yourself visible. Looking for Koen, Stefan, Karma, and Paul. Yeah, I think we got everyone in. Thank you. So we start with the outcomes of the poll, and we will ask the panel members to reflect on that. And Ruben will show the first outcome. Ruben?
All right, thank you, Katja. I'm going to share my screen with the poll results. There we go. I hope you all see them. And this is the first question. What is your favorite measure to restore river connectivity?
So barrier removal is number one, I guess. And is this in agreement with everybody in the panel members?
I would say yes, for sure. From an ecological perspective, it's the most appropriate measure. But being aware of the fact that we have many dams that are already old and part of the human river system that we are now facing, it's probably not the only option that we have nowadays. So I think for small weirs, especially those that have no functions, as we have also heard in many other talks, barrier removal is the only and the appropriate measure. But thinking about the Danube and the big dams, it's not realistic to remove. And I think it's also not meaningful for our society to think about removing those big dams. All the infrastructure is adapted nowadays to the situation. And we have to live with those dams for at least probably some more generations. But we can do a lot with those dams, as I also have shown in my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. I'm just looking at the image of Koen. Koen, you are 90 degrees turned. Yeah, much better, much better. Yeah, otherwise I have to sit like this. Any other reflections of the panel members on what Stefan added to this?
I think I would echo what Stefan said, that absolutely barrier removal is the thing that's going to achieve the greatest ecological outcomes. But the reality is we live in a human environment, and there are just some structures that we aren't going to be able to remove without excessive cost to society. So we are going to have to find solutions for how we overcome those barriers. But I would also advocate for not building more barriers as being one of the main ways that we restore connectivity. If we can stop making more and more barriers, well, that's less of an issue that we have to deal with in the future.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'm just wondering, Karma, if you look at Bhutan and India, and what is the impact of dams being built in India on your populations of your fish in Bhutan? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Because it might help to keep them in.
I agree, but geographically we are located north of India. So, I mean, with the exception of a few migratory species such as the golden mahseer, that might go back and forth between those two countries. Dam as such, I do not envision major impacts on the fishes of Bhutan with the dams that are being constructed downstream.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of chime in on the answer of the poll. And I completely agree with Stefan and Paul and the rest of the people who kind of voted for that. I think in a perfect world, dams should not exist, but we don't live in a perfect world. I think there are economic developments are important, and if removing the dam is possible for certain countries, then yes, but for developing nations where the dams aren't even that old, the dams going up as we speak, I think we definitely have to look for alternative solutions in that. And also kind of learning from our mistakes, couldn't see any option there, but I think learning from what we have about barrier and its impact, if we can, introspectively kind of, prevent other dams from coming up and leave at least some of the rivers running wild, I think that could definitely be a way to go.
Okay, thank you. And then Koen, barrier removal might not be an option in the Netherlands because we also have to protect ourselves against the high tides. But we are opening barriers. Do you see that? What are your thoughts? Do you think we should open all barriers? Open up instead of remove?
What I think is it's a way of thinking, looking at barriers. We humans have a tendency to think in technical solutions, and then sometimes we forget the most obvious thing, like can the barrier be absolutely removed? So the first thing is thinking about, can it be removed? If not, can it be opened up? And if not, maybe you can go in more technical solutions like fish passages. But you have to start with the first question, can it be removed? And I think it's important to take a measure that goes as much along with the flow of the river. Many technical solutions like fish passages have a stream that goes on the sideways of rivers, and that's not very good in a way of attracting fish, guiding the way out of the way up. So yeah, go with the flow if possible.
Okay, thank you, Koen. I would like to take you to the next outcome of the poll. Ruben, please, could you
All right.
show us and tell us what we see?
That was an interesting one. What are the most frequent issues around barriers and fish migration in your region? Let's see, can you all see how many people participated? It's on the bottom right. Is that visible? Should be,
yeah,
35?
35.
Okay.
Yeah. And it says your region, so we don't know where the people.
Yeah, this is true, Katja. We don't really know, but
we can ask because I assume that the panel members also voted. So let's start with Paul. So which one did you choose?
Upstream fish passage is our first issue. Particularly here, we've got a lot of amphidromous species which undertake their upstream migration at a size of sort of 4 or 5 centimeters. And so even little drops as much as 5 or 10 centimeters below a culvert, for example, can almost completely prevent upstream passage. So we have hundreds of thousands of small structures all over the river network. And because of the size of the fish that are migrating upstream, we essentially have thousands of barriers, and that's preventing them from accessing the habitat that is there. Definitely habitat availability is an issue, and environmental flows are issues as well, but you've got to get the fish in there in the first place for those other things to be an issue.
Yeah.
Downstream passage is something that is coming up more, but that's the primary focus with that is eels. And so we're losing eels as they migrate down through hydropower turbines and flood pumping stations. And that's in particularly important for the indigenous Maori people of New Zealand, where eels are a really important townlet species, as they call them, so a really treasured species. So that's a really important thing culturally in New Zealand.
Okay, thank you. And then looking at Karma, would this be also your ranking for your region?
Actually, no, I voted for habitat availability.
Yeah.
And given our landscape and the kind of riverscape that we have, we don't have a lot of migratory species. Most of them, as you've seen the hydrology, most of them are habitat specialists, the ones that live in currents, and then there are the other ones that prefer pool. And again, very limited knowledge of fish passage upstream or downstream. I kind of voted for habitat availability. And that is purely from the point of view that as in when more dams come into our water bodies, I think access to those spawning streams, which could be important for a species such as the golden mahseer. And just from that point of view, I voted for habitat availability.
Thank you for explaining this. Koen, is this your order of things?
I think so in the Netherlands. Just came a report out that there are about 60,000 barriers in the Netherlands blocking glass seal. So there are a lot of them in Holland. But I think, of course, there are many factors that are hindering fish. Just a few examples. In the Netherlands, we have quite a lot of shipping. We have very busy rivers. So we have silver eels that get hit by boats, for example, but also fishery as close to dams. Also here at the Herman Dam. So we are happy now that there is legislation that fishermen have to have more distance to our dams, because many fish there, they're in a traffic jam more or less. So it's they're very vulnerable at these moments. So like everything in nature is just not one simple thing. It's always a combining of many factors. But yeah, like Paul said, if you have a dam and the fish can't in, it's of course it is very visible and it's a major problem. So you have to fix these problems, of course.
Can I add something to that, Katja?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it might be also a question on the target species that you're looking at, right? If we are thinking about diatomous species that do need the connection to the sea, then obviously upstream or a downstream passage, depending on the migration direction, is a bigger issue than habitat availability within an impounded section of, for example, the Danube or maybe even the Mekong. So yeah, it really depends.
Yeah, thank you for adding this. And Stefan, you worked on several large rivers. Would you think that this order of things goes for all rivers, or is there a difference between the rivers? What should be the first issue?
Yeah, I would agree with Ruben that it depends on the situation, but it's a quite good general reflection of the situation. For example, in Austria, we had released our upstream fish pass guideline already 10 years ago. So we have a lot of good practice since 10 years, and about 2,000 barriers have been made passable for upstream migration already. But for downstream migration, which was my first choice, we had the first conference just last week. So we have a significant delay in implementing the latest technologies here in Austria, and we have the same situation as Koen indicated, with more than 60,000 barriers. Some of them are passable, most of them are not. And environmental flows are still a big issue. So I think I ranked it the third level. Yeah. In terms of hydropeaking, for example, 800 kilometers are affected by hydropeaking in Austria. And this is an issue not so much considered in other countries, as I realized, because the stranding and increased drift due to hydropeaking is just a phenomenon that has been identified the last 10 or 15 years in some of the countries that have storage hydropower. And of course, habitat availability is probably most of the critical issues when we have fixed the continuity issue. For all the others, we have the hydropower mainly as the stakeholder that we can directly target. But for habitat, it's more complex. So the landowners are spread, and to get them involved in the restoration and rehabilitation programs is a big challenge. And land availability is being reduced from year to year, not only in the Western world, but worldwide. So these limitations will be a challenge also in the future.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. We will go to the last outcome of the...
All right, let's see.
We only have a couple of minutes left to reflect on that.
There we go.
So I wondered if there is someone in the panel members who had fully disagree. No, so...
I fully disagreed, yes.
You fully disagreed?
Yes.
Cool. Why?
Because I think it's way more complex than only focusing on fish passage. I think you should, if you really want to help the fish, you should have a plan for all the factors that matters, like habitat we just discussed, connectivity, other mortality rates. You have to look at the whole thing, and just passage is just one part of it. And I think there's a good thing going on now in the minds, also in the political minds, that fish passage is important. But I think that what most politicians don't realize that if you just fix or just put a fish passage there, that all the problems are solved. Biodiversity is way more complex than that. I think we are really just at the start at restoring our fish, and we have to look wider and broader than that. So it should just be one part of the whole plan, I guess.
Koen, this is very clear message. Thank you. I just do a short round along the other panel members to see if they also have a last message for the audience. Stefan.
Yeah, I also agree, but it could be a strategy as part of an overall strategy as we have for the river basin management plans. And a national strategy, of course, is not sufficient. We need a basin-wide strategy, which is sometimes taken up by river commissions, but those should be strengthened, and their competence should be enlarged to be fully able to implement those strategies.
Thank you, Stefan. Karma.
Thank you. I actually had a preceding question that I had to ask myself before I answered this question, and keeping the Bhutanese context in mind. So the first thing is, do we have fish and do we have the kind of landscape whereby a fish ladder would work successfully or not? And that's where I kind of somewhat agreed. I think a lot needs to be done first. We need to first explore the kind of fisheries resources that we have in Bhutan, and then see what their needs are, environmental, ecological, and all that. And then maybe arrive at a decision, well, if a fish passage would work or not. And if the answer is yes, and if fish passage is the way to go forward to allow those movement, then definitely, I think a fish passage strategy would definitely be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Karma. Paul?
I think I agree with what others have said, that sort of a fish passage strategy can't be in isolation from all of the other aspects that affect our freshwater sort of ecology and communities. But I would also say that I think it's something we know quite a lot about, and we can do quite a lot about fairly straight away, whereas there are some other things that take much longer to do and there's a lot more uncertainty about. And therefore, just because it's only part of the puzzle doesn't mean we shouldn't sort of put this piece out there and allow people to act on it from the start. And I think, you know, that can feed into both sort of broader spatial planning. Should we put a hydropower into this catchment, or, you know, dam there, right down to how we deal with existing structures and go forwards from there.
Okay, thank you. We have to close this session. So thank you so much, the speakers and the guests who were interviewed on the spot, for your contributions. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot today. And I also thank the people, Ruben, of course, being the master of all. And there is a lot of technical support, which you do not see, but I do. So thank you. And if you are still more into the rest, so there are some breakout sessions after this closure. But before doing that, there will be a short announcement on next year's Fish Passage Conference. And the real closing up will be done by Herman Wanningen himself. So from me and from Ruben, bye, and hope to see you live next year.
Goodbye.
Bye.
And thanks, Katja, for the great moderation.
Thank you.
Bye.
The Columbia River flows through mountains, deserts, and farmland in the Pacific Northwest corner of the United States. The Columbia River Basin is best known for its salmon, lamprey, and sturgeon, and the challenge to support their long migrations through a river system that has been altered significantly by humans. Its tributaries, the Snake and Yakima Rivers, converge in the Tri-Cities of Washington State. That's the location for the 2022 Fish Passage Conference. Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, located next to the last free-flowing stretch of the Columbia, will host the International Conference on River Connectivity. Join us as we explore innovation for next-generation fish passage technology. See advanced research being done at the laboratory and technology being tested in nearby rivers. Our organizing team includes regional research institutions, hydropower management groups, and Native American tribes. The conference will focus on global innovations in upstream and downstream fish passage. How can we help fish to get to where they are going while considering environmental justice and equity aspects of river connectivity? You'll hear about next-generation turbine design and new ways to monitor fish behavior. Approaches include computer and field-based research and development that aims to improve river connectivity. Fish Passage 2022 will offer an online experience for those who can't join us in person. Either way, you'll have the opportunity to connect with partners pushing the boundaries of fish passage technology and policy to improve river connectivity around the world.
All right. Yeah. So 4 days is coming to an end. I want to thank everybody for joining the session. But before we go, we have a couple of breakout sessions. I'm going to announce them at the end of my small presentation. Can you show the screen? Yeah. So my name is Herman Wanningen. I'm the director of the World Fish Migration Foundation, and we started the foundation in 2014. And since then, we have organized conferences and shared knowledge and got people together on World Fish Migration Days. And our mission is to save migratory fish. And I want to give a special thanks to the presenters. Mark, can you show the next slide? The presenters of the last days, the people who were interviewed, I really love the fact that we had these live interviews. It's so engaging to see all these people around the world working on these projects to help fish. I want to thank all the sponsors who made this possible, the Fish Passage Steering Group and the advisory group to help us with selecting speakers. And the selection was done really well. We had great speakers. And what we want to do is, as a foundation, is to celebrate and make people proud who are working on all these projects around the world, like the Fish Migration River Project in the Netherlands or dam removal projects in Estonia and so on. Next slide, please. And every 2 years, we are organizing the World Fish Migration Day, and we are bringing together the fish passage community, but also people who are working on river restoration, river connectivity, outreach, and we want to bring them together. And this is the map of last year, World Fish Migration Day. Over 200 or around 300 events, and in total we have had over 1,500 events in the last 4 years. So next year on May 2022, we organized the 5th one. It's an anniversary, so we hope that you all will join with an outreach event or webinars or whatever event you can think about. You are welcome to join. And our theme for next year is break free. So we want to let the fish break free through the barriers and in any kind of way, through fishways, dam removals, all kinds of solutions are welcome. Next slide, please. And now we have a video from Jeremy Wade. And Jeremy Wade is host of the Rivers Monsters program on Discovery Channel. And he's an ambassador for us, and he has a message about World Fish Migration Day. He's inviting you all to join. So can you play the video, Mark?
Hello. Because most of the fish that need to travel up and down rivers in order to feed or to breed do so out of sight of humans, they need us to highlight the problems that they can face and also the solutions to those problems. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing on the next World Fish Migration Day. Events are going to range all the way from fish art competitions right the way to full-blown removal of dams, or you can organise your own event. So note the date in your diary. It's 21st of May 2022. See you there. Hello.
Right.
Because most of the fish that need to
again. All right, we're going to go to the breakout groups, and before we do that, I want to thank everybody again. It was a pleasure. Thank you, team, for hosting this, the technical part. Super well done. Also, Carrie Brink for coordinating the whole conference. So thank you a lot. You will see in the chat, you will see a link to the breakout groups. We have Telma Biotel from Norway, Oregon RFID from the USA. They are staying up very late at the moment, and the LV Eel Counter from the Netherlands. And if you want to know more about what they do and how they can help you with your research, go to these breakout groups and visit their sessions. Thank you, and see you hopefully next year somewhere on a live event. Hey, bye-bye.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh na 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 na. Hey, hey, hey. Tusipoziba ufa tutajenga ukuta. Tutunze mazingira na masandio sasa. We have to protect our environment. The future generations will judge us by our actions today. Ufa tutajenga ukuta. Tutunze mazingira na masandio sasa. We have to protect our environment. The future generations will judge us by our actions today.
Rivers can't take it no more. Reason being in a choke from all the plastic and waste material being disposed. Take a trip down Nairobi River. I promise there's nothing to smile about. All you will see is bumpers and condoms floating around, blocking the flow of water. Fish in a shindo tuli. Fanya nini to deserve this? Tourists wanna die. There's really nothing to see here. We are careless to careless for the rivers that came off for us. Give us water plus. It's a natural resource to chunge our resources. The source is God. He put us in charge. So let us take charge. Let us take charge.
Tusipoziba ufa tutajenga ukuta. Tutunze mazingira na masandio sasa. We have to protect our environment. The future generations will judge us by our actions today. Ufa tutajenga ukuta. Tutunze mazingira na masandio sasa. We have to protect our environment. The future generations will judge us by our actions today.
If we have clean rivers, then to corner clean lakes. When we have clean lakes, then we have more fish. Then to corner more food, feeding up the nation. Everything is all good. Namika Larry Dwayne, I will play my partner clean. Easy river to heal the scars. Kawangari Matai, I will die for this. Big up to Kilam say, anacheza kama yeah. Making sure innovations don't destroy our earth. Now the slums going green. Mazingira yetu haya ya wasafi.
Haya ya wasafi, yeah. Tusipoziba ufa tutajenga ukuta. Tutunze mazingira na masandio sasa. We have to protect our environment. The future generations will judge us by our actions today. Ufa tutajenga ukuta. Tutunze mazingira na masandio sasa. We got to protect our environment. The future generations will judge us by our actions today.
Na Wakenya mto zetu zinaumia. Takataka zimejaa inaumia. Uchafu na plastiki ndio samaki sahi. We really need to do something to change this. Take responsibility, be responsible, reuse, reduce, recycle. Stop turning our forest into dumping sites. It's a bad sight walai. Inafaa tuna act sahi. Otherwise future itakuwa messed up. Just imagine toy wako anauliza what's a river? Utajibu, utamwambia nini? Akiuliza Lake Victoria ilifanyika nini? Walai, it's crazy. We really need to change this.
We really need to change this now. I say we really need to change this now.